Hello, welcome. Time to talk about books. But anyway, for this video, I don't actually have 3 books to talk about. I only have 2 books, and I could have waited for for me to finish reading the 3rd book, whatever that is, to make another video. But I feel like wanting to make a video today. If you have that desire to do something, and this is something that I recently have said to myself: if I want to do something, just do it. So right now I just want to make a video, so I'm making a video regardless whether I have read a 3rd book or not. And 2 is that I've always have this kind of itch to do something and make them look as uniform as possible. Like how my past recent reads check-in have always been like 3 books, 3 books, 3 books, right? And sometimes it does feel kind of stifling, and I think that's sort of related to the first one. Like if I were to wait until I finish reading a 3rd book, and I'm a sluggish reader, then I will not be able to honor my desire to make a video now, right? So that is why this video is here. Instead of respecting my itch for things to be uniform, I try to respect my desire to be as flexible as possible. Anyway, let's talk about the first book. And this one was something that I've wanted to read for quite a while. This is Yu Hua's To Live. It was translated from Chinese into English by Michael Berry. I've heard of Yu Hua for a while now. I think the first book that I got was The Seventh Day or something. But I've not read that. So this book was the first Yu Hua book that I've read. And then sometime a while before this, I saw on a video on YouTube by Berna from Berna's Bookish Adventures. She read this book and she enjoyed it, and she endorsed this book, recommended this book. So that's why I wanted to pick up this book as well. And also just kind of mention this, there was a readathon happening in May called Misery May that I wanted to sort of join, but then I was like really bad with readathons. I didn't end up reading anything for that, but this was something I intended to read for that, and I think this book would fit really well with that readathon. So yeah, better late than never, Now I'm happy that I finished reading this book, and I can finally share with you guys how this book really is. And to me, it was okay. It was okay. It was not bad. It was a decent read. 3 out of 5 stars. So this book is about a man living in 20th century China. His name is Fu Gui, and he initially lives a pampered and rich life with his parents and his wife and 1 daughter and an unborn son. So his life is really happy. His father is rich. They own lands. They have like big houses. But then Fu Gui has this terrible weakness. He loves to gamble. And so one day, because of a bad decision that he makes while gambling, he loses his family's property and wealth. Like overnight, all of their wealth are gone, and their lives turn from this like rich people's life into a poor peasant's life. And the change is really drastic. And this book would pretty much chronicle how Fu Gui's life and also his family how they deal with this change in life and change in lifestyle, change in social status, how they move forward from that. And this book is indeed a book that includes a lot of miserable moments. So basically, after Fukui and his family becomes poor, their life pretty much turns quite miserable. One by one, lousy things keep happening to this family. So it's sort of like what TV tropes would call trauma conga line. If you're familiar with that website, you get so many unfortunate events, misfortune befalling this family. And it can get quite depressing to read this book. But I would say this book is also not some kind of trauma porn. It is not. And one reason for that is because of the voice of this book. So this book is narrated by Fukui himself. And the way that the story is framed is that we have a character who is a writer from the city. He comes to the countryside and he meets with this man Fukui. And so basically the frame of this book is kind of like a short narration by this man from the city, and the meat of this book, the bulk of it, would be the narration by Fukui himself, told from the point of view of a Fukui who is already old, who has gone through all of the events in this book, and is pretty much narrating this book to that man and also to us, the readers, from his, I would say, experience point of view. And I think that influenced a little bit the tone of this book and why I would say this book is not exactly a trauma porn. So I think it is because of how the point of view changes the tone. It's basically because Fukui, the character and the narrator, is already has gone through the events, he would once in a while inject some kind of introspection into the narrative, or he would inject some kind of wisdom gained from hindsight or reflection during the narration. And so it sort of mitigates a little bit of that misery or dreariness while reading this book. There is a little bit of lightness in there as well. There is a little bit of positivity throughout this book as well. And also within the story, like I said just now, this story is about a series of misfortune befalling a group of people, a family. Usually, in a story like that, we can sort of expect that, the way that the characters react to things happening to them is going to influence how the story would turn out. And I would say that certainly applies here as well. It is how the characters react to the events that really sort of shape how this book, the whole tone, turn out. And so it is not a totally dreary book. Like, it's not 100% dreary. It's more like 95% dreary. You know what I mean? So, and I think, while we're on the topic of the narration, there is a bit of that sense of detachment because of the nature of the narrator. And I feel like it is that sense of detachment that sort of makes me feel somewhat distant from the family. Like, it's, you could be quite immersed in the suffering of this family, right? Suffering of the character. You could be, but I just didn't feel like I was as immersed as I expected myself to be. I felt like I was a bit far from the characters and I was just watching them I really did feel that way. When something bad happens, you could feel sad, but I just didn't feel as sad as I wanted to be. You know what I mean? So that, I would say, maybe detracted just a little bit from the experience. But it might work for some other people. It might work for you guys. So who knows? You should try this. Something else I like about this book is how there's this sense of the absurd being peppered throughout this book. I would not say that this book is a work of absurdist literature, but there is a bit of element of the absurd in here. You know, like how you know, some not heavy, but some light mention or discussion about the meaning of life in a way, or the lack thereof, of the meaning of life in the characters' personal lives. And there is a certain conclusion that the main character reaches in this book that sort of reminds me of that as well, you know. And there is also a bit of I would say light discussion on fate and destiny as well in this book, and how all of those things blend in together and blend in with the plot. And also, if you are a history buff, which I'm not, I'm interested in history, but I can't say that I know history very much. I need to read more. So if you are familiar with the Chinese history in the 20th century, there will be some major events or major things happening at that time that you would notice in here, such as the conflict between the Nationalist and Liberation Army. You have things like the Great Leap Forward, the land reform, all of those things happening in here. And it's really interesting to see how those events are filtered through the eyes of the peasants, aka people who don't really have a lot of power to exert real change in society. You know, people who are people who are not very significant in terms of their social influence. And it's really interesting to see a story that sort of chronicles all of those things, but through their perspective. So this is To Live by Yu Hua. And while I'm talking about, you know, because I mentioned something about small people, you know, people, poor people, people that don't have like real power, the next book feels kind of related to that. You know, I just thought of this connection, and the next book I finished was a very short one called A Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid, and this book is a non-fiction. It is an essay, so it's a very short book. So this one is about the author's grievance towards the certain elements of her home country of Antigua. Basically, this book is kind of like an indictment of the corrupt nature of the government in Antigua, and also the colonization, the history of colonization that has affected Antigua, which led to, or partly led to, how Antigua is like on the current day, and also pretty much criticism on how Antigua as a society operates, and how it is being perceived by people, by foreigners, how all of these things relate to each other. And when I was reading this book, I was really blown away by the amount of anger in this book. Like, this essay is angry. and you know, you'll know it when you see it. This essay is angry, it is passionate, it is so fiery. So when reading this book, you really get the sense that the author is coming from a place where she feels really strong emotions toward her home country. I really like how the author talks about the corruption that happens among the rulers and the officials in the government of Antigua. I really like how she also starts this essay by talking about this country through the point of view of a tourist. And I would say that part, it feels like a nice introduction on how it would eventually segue into the deeper deeper sides of Antigua, you know, the government and the people, but mostly on the government. Basically, this essay is about criticizing the government. One thing I would mention is that this book may not be hyper specific on the things that the character wants to criticize. And I noticed that this is like one of the things people sort of critique or about this book, where it doesn't really mention clearly who exactly in the government is doing such and such things that the essay mentioned, who exactly is that person who is doing such and such stuff. You know, it doesn't really include like a clear timeline of who does that, what happens after that, what happens so and so, you know, specific things. But for me, that doesn't bother me so much because, first of all, I don't know a lot about Antigua before reading this book. And even after reading this book, I wouldn't say I know a lot about Antigua. But what this book does is that it kind of introduces me to something new, which I definitely learn about. It introduces me to a new country, which I am not familiar with before this. And I know I can definitely do my own further research on what other books to read, on what things I can search online, you know, to learn more about it. So that is definitely that. But secondly, I don't think that this essay is necessarily something that that is there just to present facts in a organized, non-partial way. In fact, this essay, because of its, you know, the intensity of the anger in this essay, I would not even call this essay. This essay is not even trying to be impartial. It is very biased. It is very emotional, highly charged. And I think this is the second thing that I noticed, what a lot of people, especially those who gave 1 star to this book, didn't like. Like, a lot of them just were, you know, a lot of them were put off by the amount of anger and emotion in this essay. And I'm like, I feel like a lot, you know, they are kind of missing the point in a way. It reminds me a lot about respectability in discussions and discourse. You know, like people who don't necessarily present themselves as cool, calm, and collected. They, you know, people who seem emotional, who seem angry, who seem hysterical are often dismissed, especially when they are talking about their experience. You know, we see this a lot with how, you know, marginalized minority talking about their experience, and they tend to look angry, they are disgruntled, they're frustrated, and, you know, like, what do you expect them to do, right? Are you are you expecting them to be like relaxed about how their lives are totally ruined, So I just find it strange that a lot of people are complaining about the anger in this book. So yeah, personally, I like the anger. I think we need a lot of that. I do think we need a lot of emotions. And yeah, emotion is certainly something that can be injected in so many areas. I mean, not all discourse, of course, maybe, I don't know, I'm not really an expert on this, but I really like the fact that this is a very emotional essay. It is a very nice read, and I would definitely recommend this to everyone out there. And yeah, I guess that's all for what I'm gonna talk about, what I talked about. tenses in this video. So I'll see you in another one. So until then, take care. It's hot. Take care. Thanks for watching. Bye.